The night was supposed to be quiet. A few casual interviews, a red carpet stroll, maybe a quick soundbite about music. But then Benny Blanco leaned into the microphone, and with a grin that carried both mischief and certainty, he said the words that detonated across the internet. "Yes, I'll tell you about the wedding. Even the rings." It was a tabloid-shattering moment. Cameras snapped like gunfire in the distance, their flashes turning the evening into a battlefield of light. Headlines began writing themselves in real time. Blanco speaks. Selena's wedding secret spilled. Twitter feeds lit up with gasps, gifs, and frantic speculation. On TikTok, fans froze their screens just to lip-read every syllable, convinced they had just witnessed history in the making. This wasn't just another Hollywood reveal. This wasn't a throwaway soundbite about a celebrity engagement. This was the unthinkable. Benny Blanco, the man who had guarded his relationship with Selena Gomez with almost militant privacy, was now pulling back the curtain, and yet he didn't give it all away. Not yet. He dangled the most dangerous piece of bait, the rings. A detail that seems small, but in the world of celebrity culture, jewelry is never just jewelry. Rings are coded messages, status symbols, declarations of power, or, in this case, the undeniable proof of authenticity. The crowd knew it. The reporters knew it. And Selena's fans, loyal, obsessive, protective, felt the weight of that word hang in the air. Rings. Because rings don't just sparkle. They speak. They whisper secrets about loyalty, about permanence, about promises made in shadows and brought into the light. And if Benny was really going to describe them, it meant he was ready to silence the cynics once and for all. The atmosphere shifted. What had begun as playful banter became something else entirely. A cultural moment, a line in the sand between rumor and reality. And as Benny leaned forward, about to paint a picture that no paparazzi could ever capture, the world collectively held its breath. But what he said next about the rings left even Selena's fiercest critics in disbelief. The word hung in the air like smoke. Rings. But this moment was never just about diamonds, carats, or celebrity sparkle. It was about something bigger, something almost defiant. In an industry built on illusions, where relationships are announced like PR campaigns and dissolved like expired contracts, Selena Gomez's wedding had become a battlefield for something rare. Authenticity. Because for years, Selena's personal life had been consumed by the very machine that now waited for her downfall. Tabloids thrived on her heartbreak. Commentators picked apart her lyrics as if they were confessionals. Former fans clung to old flames, spinning fantasies that left no space for her future. Every step she took in love was shadowed by questions whispered loudly enough to become headlines. Was it real? Or just another performance? The skeptics wore many faces. There were the tabloids, eager to plaster her name beside every manufactured scandal. There were the critics, who branded her relationship with Benny a stunt, a diversion, a storyline designed to keep her trending. And then there were the ex-fans, loyal not to her happiness but to their own nostalgia, insisting she belonged to the past. Together they formed a chorus of cynicism, sneering, doubting, waiting. For them, the wedding was never a celebration. It was a test. If the details felt too perfect, they would scream staged. If Benny stayed silent, they would mutter cover-up. If Selena looked too happy, they would call it a mask. It was a rigged game, one in which her truth could never win, and yet. This is exactly why the stakes were so high. Selena's journey wasn't just about finding love. It was about surviving under the brightest, harshest spotlight in modern culture. It was about resilience after public heartbreak, about rebuilding dignity after being stripped bare by a press that never played fair. To her fans, the true fans, this wedding wasn't gossip. It was redemption, proof that authenticity could outlast the noise. And so when Benny Blanco stood on that stage, teasing secrets of the ceremony, he wasn't merely gossiping. He was challenging the cynics. He was daring them to keep doubting in the face of details so raw, so personal, they could only be real. But Benny didn't rush. He let the tension rise like steam under a locked lid. The crowd leaned forward, reporters adjusted their recorders, social media accounts went live with captions screaming, "He's about to say it." Every second of silence made the anticipation sharper, more electric, because everyone knew what was at stake. This was the moment that could either validate years of criticism or obliterate them in a single sentence. Selena's love, her resilience, her truth, all of it now balanced on the edge of Benny's next words. And then, with the world hanging off his paws, he smiled. And just when the critics thought they had her figured out, Benny dropped the detail no one saw coming. Every great story has its shadows. And for Selena Gomez, the shadows never came from strangers in the dark. They came from the brightest spotlights, the loudest voices, the very platforms that claimed to celebrate her. The so-called keepers of pop culture, gossip blogs, critics, and even former fans became the villains in a saga that was never just about love, but about power, control, and the exploitation of one woman's vulnerability. The first villains were the gossip blogs. For them, Selena wasn't a person. She was a headline generator, a guaranteed traffic surge, a living, breathing clickbait machine. Every rumor of a breakup became a breaking news story. Every cryptic Instagram caption was dissected like scripture. And whenever she tried to move forward, the blogs reached backward, dragging out old relationships, old feuds, old wounds. They weren't reporting, they were profiting. The cruel irony. They called it covering love stories. In reality, they were monetizing heartbreak. Then came the critics, not anonymous bloggers behind dimly lit keyboards, but polished commentators in glossy magazines and on primetime shows. They dressed their cynicism in authority, branding Benny and Selena's relationship a PR stunt. They whispered about timing and strategic appearances, as though two human beings couldn't possibly choose each other without corporate choreography. To these critics, authenticity was a myth. Every smile was staged, every date night scripted, every hand held under a spotlight reduced to a contract. Their arrogance lay in their certainty. They believed they could decode the entire relationship by squinting at paparazzi shots. But perhaps the sharpest sting came not from tabloids or critics, but from a portion of her own fandom. These ex-fans weren't enemies in the traditional sense. They once adored her. Yet their loyalty was shackled to the past. They weren't cheering for her future. They were rooting for old flames, nostalgic for relationships that had already burned out. They turned love into obsession, demanding she repeat old mistakes to fit their fantasies. And in doing so, they undermined the very happiness they claimed to want for her. Here's the contradiction that unites them all. They claim to care about love, but only on their terms. Gossip blogs pretended to champion romance, but only when it sold clicks. Critics claimed to expose truth, but only when it fit their cynical worldview. Ex-fans cried out for Selena's joy, but only if it aligned with their nostalgia. They weren't defenders of love. They were hijackers of it, and their arrogance was palpable. When Selena and Benny were spotted together, they sneered. When they appeared affectionate, they scoffed. When whispers of marriage began, they rolled their eyes. To them, it was never enough to accept love as real. It had to be bent, doubted, dissected, and dismissed. But this is where their hypocrisy becomes their weakness. Because by shouting so loudly, by dismissing so confidently, they set the stage for their own downfall. Every cruel headline, every cynical remark, every bitter tweet raised the stakes. They built a tower of doubt so tall, it only took one solid truth to topple it. And that truth was coming. Because Benny Blanco wasn't just about to reveal another gossip-worthy tidbit. He wasn't playing their game. He was about to redefine it. The blogs could monetize whispers. The critics could dismiss headlines. The ex-fans could cling to ghosts of the past. But none of them could drown out the weight of Benny's next revelation. A revelation so personal, so undeniable it would silence the cynics not with an argument, but with authenticity itself. But for every whisper of doubt, Benny's next words would roar louder. To understand why Benny Blanco's words cut through the noise, you have to understand the people behind them. Because this wasn't just a wedding, it wasn't just celebrity gossip. It was the union of two stories, two very different journeys that collided against all odds in a world determined to keep them apart. Selena's journey. Selena Gomez grew up in front of cameras. Her adolescence broadcast to millions. At first, she was a Disney darling, the bright smile, the safe role model, the dream every parent wanted their child to follow. But behind the glitter of Hollywood, her reality was far heavier. She battled lupus, an autoimmune disease that threatened not just her health but her very life. She endured a kidney transplant, an experience that left scars far deeper than the ones the public could see. She faced depression, anxiety, and the crushing weight of being defined by her relationships rather than her artistry. And still, through it all, Selena kept creating. Kept singing, kept showing up. Her resilience became her brand. Not the fake resilience that Hollywood scripts, but the messy, authentic resilience that fans could feel in her voice, see in her vulnerability, and relate to in their own lives. Yet the world refused to give her peace. Every heartbreak she endured was magnified, every tear dissected, every rebound scrutinized. To the tabloids, she wasn't an artist. She was a character in a soap opera they could script at will. And still, she endured. Selena's pursuit of authenticity, in her art, in her relationships, in herself, became her rebellion against a system that profits from illusion. And so, when she found love again, the question wasn't just whether it would last. The question was whether the world would allow it to be real. Benny's journey, and then there was Benny. Unlike Selena, Benny Blanco didn't grow up in the spotlight. He was the quirky outsider, the studio rat, the kid who never looked like the archetypal pop star. He didn't fit the mold, and that was exactly why he thrived behind the scenes. He became a producer, a hitmaker, a silent architect of some of the biggest songs in the world. Everyone sang his melodies, but few knew his face. He was underestimated, overlooked, dismissed by those who only value the front man and never the one pulling strings backstage. But Benny's strength was in his eccentricity, his humor, his refusal to conform, his ability to embrace weirdness in an industry obsessed with polish. Slowly, the quirky kid became a powerhouse, not because he played the game, but because he rewrote it. Still, for all his success, he too carried loneliness. Fame surrounded him with stars, but not with intimacy. The industry crowned him a genius, but rarely treated him like someone worth rooting for and love. And so when he and Selena came together, their relationship wasn't just unexpected, it was radical. Two people underestimated in different ways, daring to choose each other. Heroes of vulnerability. Together, Selena and Benny became something bigger than themselves. She, the survivor who refused to be defined by heartbreak. He, the outsider who built an empire on his own terms. Their union was a rebellion against cynicism, a statement that vulnerability could be strength, and that authenticity could thrive even in the most artificial of industries. They weren't just lovers, they were symbols. Proof that love doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful, and that scars, whether emotional or physical, don't diminish beauty. In fact, they magnify it, and that's why the wedding mattered. That's why the rings mattered. Because the rings weren't just decorations on their fingers. They weren't props for paparazzi lenses. They were symbols of everything they had endured, everything they had overcome, and everything they promised to build together. For Selena, the ring represented survival, the triumph of authenticity over a lifetime of scrutiny. For Benny, it represented validation, the proof that the quirky outsider had been chosen not for his fame, but for his heart. And together, those rings became a message to the world. This is real. This is ours. And no amount of cynicism can take it away. The story of Selena and Benny wasn't a fairy tale because it was flawless. It was a fairy tale because it was flawed, and still beautiful. And so, when Benny leaned into the microphone, ready to describe the rings in detail, it wasn't just another celebrity reveal. It was a culmination, a defiance, a love letter, written not in words, but in symbols forged into metal. And when the rings were finally revealed, the symbolism stunned even their closest friends. In the months leading up to the wedding, The world turned into detectives. Every Instagram story became a clue. Every paparazzi photo became evidence. Every silence became suspicious. Selena posted a simple picture of her hand resting on a coffee mug. No rings, no captions. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. Is she hiding something? Wedding band cropped out? Fans zoomed, cropped, and dissected pixels as though decoding state secrets. TikTok feeds filled with red circles, freeze frames, and breathless commentary. If you look closely, the reflection in the mug shows conspiracy boards didn't live in basements anymore. They lived online, and Selena's love life was their headline act. The tabloids fanned the flames, churning speculation into cash. Covers screamed, "Secret ceremony in the works? Selena's shock marriage? PR romance or true love?" They pitted truth against illusion, bending every photograph into their own narrative. Some swore the couple had already married in a hidden ceremony. Others insisted it was all smoke and mirrors, a convenient distraction. Meanwhile, paparazzi hunted like predators. They camped outside restaurants, trailed cars, chased shadows down boulevards. Benny and Selena slipped through back doors, ducked into SUVs, vanished from hotel lobbies as if rehearsing for a spy thriller. The more they evaded, the more the obsession grew. Their absence became its own story. But Benny Blanco was no stranger to manipulation. He knew the machine. He'd produced the songs that the same tabloids once celebrated. He'd watched them crown artists as geniuses one week and villains the next. And so, instead of panicking, he played controlled leaks, hints dropped with surgical precision. A cryptic comment in an interview. Let's just say, rings mean more than people think. A grainy photo of a velvet box left deliberately visible in the background of a live stream. A laugh that said more than words. He never confirmed, never denied. He teased the line between truth and rumor, dangling morsels to feed the frenzy, but never enough to satisfy. Like a seasoned debater, he turned every attack into anticipation, every doubt into curiosity. The atmosphere began to feel less like celebrity gossip and more like a high-stakes debate. On one side, the cynics, tabloids, skeptics, ex-fans. On the other, the couple's quiet defiance. Each leak, each silence, each appearance became an argument in the court of public opinion. Was their love genuine or just another manufactured storyline? The stakes grew unbearable. Fans were no longer asking if Benny would speak. They were demanding when. Every interview he gave carried the possibility of the reveal. Every pause stretched into suspense. He had the truth, and the world was starving for it. And then finally he stopped playing. The crowd gathered, the reporters leaned forward, the cameras sharpened their focus. This was no longer a game of hints, and then came the moment of truth. Benny broke his silence. The room hushed. Cameras tilted forward. Reporters steadied their recorders. It was no longer about rumors, no longer about speculation. This was it. The moment that would either validate every cynic or silence them forever. Benny Blanco leaned forward, his expression half playful, half serious. And then he said the words that detonated across the culture. The rings. Yeah, I'll tell you about the rings. The first reveal was not rushed. He let the silence breathe, like a musician holding a pause before the chorus drops. And then slowly he described them. Selena's ring, he said, wasn't about size. It wasn't about screaming luxury. It wasn't a trophy of excess. Instead, it was a design chosen for meaning. An oval diamond, yes, but set in a band carved with delicate etchings, symbols tied to her personal journey. Each curve carried weight, the lupus butterfly, a subtle nod to the resilience she carried through sickness. The infinity motif, woven discreetly, representing not just forever in romance, but forever in survival. It wasn't just jewelry. It was her story, etched in metal. The crowd gasped. Fans online froze the live stream. TikTokers looped the clip, whispering, "Did you hear that?" Twitter hashtags ignited. Selena ring, forever Selena, Blanco love story. Memes spread like wildfire, a butterfly beside an infinity sign, shared as though they were sacred emblems. And then came Benny's ring. He laughed at first, brushing it off. Mine's not as fancy, but that humility only heightened the drama. His band was simple, forged in platinum. Yet inside, engraved in Selena's handwriting, were 3 words: "Love is real." The audience erupted. Simple, defiant, undeniable, this was the knockout. The villains, the blogs, the critics, the ex-fans had no counter-argument. The tabloids that once branded their love a stunt were now scrambling for new headlines. How do you spin a ring etched with lupus symbols and personal vows into a publicity stunt? How do you dismiss a design that screamed vulnerability and truth? Their arrogance collapsed under the weight of authenticity. The critics, who had insisted every gesture was staged, fell silent. Their columns, once laced with doubt, now stumbled into reluctant admiration. One by one, outlets rephrased their coverage. A symbol of strength, Selena's most personal moment. Benny shuts down the doubters. Even the ex-fans, the nostalgic voices clinging to old flames, found themselves out of arguments. The rings weren't just proof of love. They were proof that the past was the past, and the future was already sealed in platinum and diamond. And in the midst of it all stood Selena, silent but dignified. She didn't need to explain herself. She didn't need to perform happiness or prove devotion. The symbolism in her ring did it for her. For once, her love wasn't dissected, it was celebrated. Online, the eruption was seismic. TikTok edits flooded feeds, slow-motion footage of Selena with captions like, "She deserves this." Fan cams set to emotional ballads, hashtags trending across continents. Twitter lit up with messages of solidarity. This isn't just jewelry. This is survival. This is real. Even celebrities chimed in. Musicians, actors, and activists alike, sharing images of butterflies and infinity signs in support. The cultural ripple was instant. Jewelry stores reported fans requesting custom rings, like Selena's. Influencers began dissecting the deeper symbolism in their designs. Talk shows replayed Benny's words on loop, audiences gasping and applauding. But beneath the glitter of viral content, the emotional punch landed deeper. For fans who had watched Selena suffer, watched her cry, watched her pick herself back up, the ring was proof that she had arrived at something better, something lasting, something that finally silenced the noise. And Benny? He emerged as more than just the quirky outsider producer. In that moment, he became a hero of authenticity, a man who didn't just choose to love in private, but who chose to defend that love in public with truth, not spin. His reveal wasn't dramatic for its extravagance. It was dramatic for its sincerity. The villains had underestimated him. They thought he'd play coy or worse, stay silent. Instead, he detonated the one weapon cynicism cannot fight: vulnerability. The room buzzed. Social media burned, and still Benny wasn't finished. He leaned back, smirking at the frenzy he'd unleashed, as though he knew exactly what he'd just done. Because in that single moment, Benny Blanco didn't just reveal wedding rings. He revealed something much larger, a truth no critic could spin, no blog could twist, no ex-fan could deny. But if the rings shocked the world, the ripple effect that followed was even more dramatic. The reveal didn't end in that room. It detonated outward, rippling across the internet like a cultural earthquake. Within minutes, TikTok was ablaze. Fan edits layered slow-motion clips of Selena with soft piano instrumentals, captions glowing. "Love is real." Entire feeds became saturated with butterfly emojis, infinity signs, and screenshots of Benny's engraved ring. On YouTube, reaction videos popped up almost instantly. Creators leaned into the drama, wide-eyed thumbnails, titles screaming, "Benny just ended the doubters." Some broke down every detail frame by frame, pointing out the engraving, speculating on the butterfly, analyzing the symbolism as if it were a political manifesto. Others cried on camera, telling their followers, "This isn't just a celebrity wedding. This is hope." Twitter, or X, as some insisted on calling it, became a battlefield turned victory parade. Hashtags like Selena Forever, Blanco Love, and Love is Real trended across continents. Fans roasted the tabloids mercilessly, sharing screenshots of old headlines. "PR stunt? Selena settling?" plastered beside Benny's heartfelt engraving. The memes were brutal, sharp, and hilarious. Paparazzi chasing shadows while the truth sat hidden in plain sight. Critics with clown makeup photoshopped under captions like, "Where are they now?" Commentators stepped in, not just gossip columnists, but cultural analysts. On morning shows, anchors leaned forward, voices hushed with a strange reverence. This feels different. This isn't staged. This is the real deal. Lifestyle magazines reframed the couple as symbols of authenticity in a plastic age. Even serious outlets, the ones that once kept their distance from celebrity gossip, weighed in, publishing op-eds about the cultural hunger for love that feels true. The ripple effect grew stranger still. Jewelry designers saw a surge of calls asking for Selena's butterfly ring replicas. Etsy shops listed handmade engravings reading "Love is real." Fans inked tattoos of infinity signs, proudly posting photos with captions like, "If Selena can survive it all and find this, so can we." It wasn't just fandom, it was movement. Selena and Benny's wedding became shorthand for resilience, for defying cynicism, for choosing vulnerability in a world obsessed with spectacle. Meanwhile, the doubters? They were dragged into the digital town square. Old tweets resurfaced, mocking fans who once wrote, "She'll never be happy with him." Screenshots of tabloid exposés were reshared with captions like, "Oops." Their credibility evaporated overnight, buried under a tidal wave of joy and vindication. But beyond the noise, beyond the hashtags and edits and memes, something quieter pulsed underneath. For longtime fans, this wasn't just about winning an argument against critics. It was about closure. For years, they had watched Selena's heartbreak play out on the world stage. Every breakup, every relapse, every struggle dissected like entertainment. To see her now, standing in dignity, wearing a ring that symbolized survival and love, felt like a collective exhale. In living rooms across the globe, mothers and daughters shared knowing smiles. Fans whispered to themselves, "She made it." It was bigger than celebrity. It was proof that scars don't mean the story is over, they mean the story is deeper. This is why the wedding became a cultural reset moment. It wasn't about the diamond. It wasn't about the luxury. It was about reclaiming love as something sincere in an era of algorithms and fakery. Selena and Benny didn't just exchange vows. They forced an entire culture to pause and reimagine what love could look like. And yet, as the memes multiplied, as the hashtags trended, as the critics vanished into silence, another layer of truth lingered in the background. A quieter truth, one not shouted on TikTok or splashed across Twitter, one that mattered even more. Cliffhanger. Yet beyond the noise of the crowd, a quieter truth emerged, one that mattered even more. When the noise faded, when the hashtags slowed, the memes dulled and the critics retreated, what remained were the rings. Not as accessories, not as trophies of wealth, but as living symbols. The butterfly and the infinity weren't just design choices. They were chapters in a story. For Selena, the butterfly was freedom. Freedom from the cages of her past, freedom from illness, from heartbreak, from being defined by anyone but herself. For Benny, the infinity sign was devotion, not just the idea of forever, but the pledge that their bond would stretch beyond rumors, beyond doubts, beyond the temporary storms of fame. And together, those rings told a truth that no tabloid could spin. Love, real love, survives. This was bigger than a celebrity couple. This was a parable for anyone who had been doubted, dismissed, or underestimated. Selena and Benny had stood against a machine built to mock and monetize heartbreak, and instead of breaking, they had created something luminous. The rings gleamed not with diamonds, but with defiance. The cynics once said their relationship was fake. But fake things don't leave people with goosebumps. Fake things don't silence an entire industry of doubters in a single breath. Fake things fade. Real love, on the other hand, leaves an imprint. It lingers. It inspires. And that's why this moment mattered. Because it reframed the question. No longer was it about celebrity versus privacy, tabloids versus truth. It was about dignity versus doubt, vulnerability versus cynicism, love versus spectacle. Selena and Benny reminded the world that authenticity still has power. That even in an age where clicks are currency and every emotion is suspect, there is still such a thing as love that silences the noise. Viewers didn't just watch a wedding unfold. They felt themselves pulled into a greater lesson, one that whispered, "You don't have to prove your love to the world, you just have to live it." That's why the fans cried. That's why even the skeptics couldn't look away. Because deep down, we all want proof that love can survive the chaos. And here it was, sparkling on two hands, beating in two hearts, undeniable in its presence. The truth is simple but eternal. True love silences cynicism. And so, as the camera flash faded, as the headlines cooled, the story did not vanish. It transformed into something more lasting, a reminder. A reminder that dignity always outshines doubt, that authenticity always trumps spectacle, and that love, when it is real, doesn't just shine. Cliffhanger to CTA. And if this story says anything, it's this. When love is real, it doesn't just shine. It blinds the doubters, and so we arrive at the heart of it all. What began as whispers, rumors, and speculation ended with two rings. Simple yet profound, fragile yet unbreakable. Blanco didn't just reveal wedding details, he revealed a truth that no headline could ever distort. Selena Gomez has found love that is hers, authentic and undeniable.